Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I got a review for you guys of the Demko knives AD20.5. Now before I get started with this review, two things to note. A, I do have a tripod now, so hopefully the quality of the videos are going to be going up from here on out. But on top of that, this is another Knife Center exclusive. As you guys know, I just reviewed this Yojimbo 2 with the CPM Crewwear blade steel and the beautiful smooth G10 handles. But this was another Knife Center exclusive that I found actually in the same day. But this is the AD20.5. Now, for those of you that don't know the backstory of the whole AD20 thing, it was basically the AD20 was the full custom version of this guy. And then Andrew Demko came out with this little number, which was slightly smaller than the AD20, but was going to be more of a production model made in Taiwan as opposed to being made in the US. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a size comparison here. So here is the Bailout by Benchmade, which is probably this guy's closest size comparison. And these two knives are actually very similar, both using 3V blade steel and grivery handles. Oh yeah, by the way, this is unique because it's got 3V steel and red grivery handles. So I think I forgot to mention that, so there we go. But yeah, these two are very comparable in terms of material and even locks. Both of these guys have very fidgety locks, but I might do a versus video of these two later on down the line, just because they are so comparable that I think a good little head-to-head versus match would be well warranted. There we go. Now this is the Yojimbo 2 next to this guy. This was the Spyderco. This was the Knife Center exclusive. There we go. We got it eventually. The Knife Center exclusive version of this guy, as I was just talking about. But you guys can see these two are also very comparable in size. Now this knife is not big at all. This is actually a pretty small knife for my usual carry. I mean, this is my PM2 right here, and this is the Code 4. So you guys can clearly see this is not a big knife. This is a knife that gets dwarfed pretty easily by the Para 2 and the Code 4. So this thing comes in at about 7.6 inches, I want to say, 7.63, 69, somewhere in that vicinity. But yeah, not a big knife. But anyways, with that out of the way, I'm going to talk about what I like and don't like about this knife and if I can recommend it for you guys. Now, I will be calling back to the other models of this guy, but we're going to be primarily focusing on this version here with a 3V blade steel. So just keep that in mind as I go through this review. There might be things that I don't like about this knife that I might like on another knife. There might be things about this knife that I like that I don't like on the other versions of this knife. We're just reviewing this one, so just keep that in mind. Now, first and foremost, the blade on this guy is just superb. I think the clip point is excellent. Now, this does come in two different blade configurations. You got your clip point or your drop point, and you have your Wharncliffe blade shape or sheep's foot blade shape. I personally see it as a Wharncliffe, but I know a lot of people who consider it a sheep's foot because that's what Demko Knives calls it. And it is labeled as the shark's foot, which I think is really funny. I love a little play on words there, a little not really a pun, but more just, you know, obviously this is the shark lock, so they decided to use shark's foot, which I think is hilarious. But yeah, the blade shapes, both blade shapes are really, really great that come on this knife. On top of the fact, every steel that this blade comes in is pretty excellent. I'm a big fan of 3V. My Bailout by Benchmade's kind of helped me open my eyes to how good 3V can be. On top of the fact that the D2 that comes with this guy is heat treated well and has good edge retention. The D2 is going to come on another Knife Center exclusive. And then you have your AUS 10A versions, which come from Blade HQ, which I like AUS 10A. I think it's a perfectly fine steel. If you guys saw my my Voyager video, one of my first videos I ever released, now that I think about it, I talked about AUS 10A and how I like AUS 10A quite a bit. So it's all the options that this knife comes in are pretty good to go steels, good everyday carry steels. I also find that they're all pretty good tool tough steels. So these things are really, really good for everyday carry and hard use. So that's really, really great. I also like the thumb studs that came on this knife. You get these nice big old thumb studs. Now, I unfortunately have not reviewed the Frenzy yet by Cold Steel, but Andrew Demko did actually design the Frenzy. He also designed this Code 4, which I thought was kind of funny. But he put these thumb studs on the Frenzy as well, which is one of my favorite Cold Steels at the moment. And these thumb studs are just so much better than the normal standard Cold Steel thumb stud, which is really, really thin. You can see this one's very wide. This one on the Code 4 is very thin. So I like the more wide thumb stud. It's just more comfortable on the thumb, especially with a knife like this on ball bearings. It just really helps you get a good kind of purchase with your thumb on the thumb stud and just a good flick out. So that's really, really, really nice. Another thing I really like about this is the jimping they put on the blade. It's just superb. It's not too intense. It's not too bad. It's just right on the money. I really do appreciate it. Not to mention, this guy has so many different opening systems that it's kind of funny. And they even put their own, I'm going to call it the Demko hole, because obviously there's the Spidey hole and now there's the Demko hole, which is this really nice long hole here, which really helps to flick out. Or if you want to be one of those hipster guys that just use the hole instead of using the thumb studs, you can do that right there, which is pretty nice. And then, like I was talking about, the 3V on this guy is amazing. I've used this knife for a couple weeks now. I actually released the video of me unboxing this guy. And yeah, the 3V, I haven't had to sharpen this guy, haven't had to strop it up. It is still perfectly factory sharp. It is razor sharp, by the way, kind of scary sharp for what this knife is. But the 3V is not dulled. It's a very, very tough, good, everyday use steel. And I found that this works really, really well and is a very, very nice steel, and I do appreciate it. Now, moving down to the handle. There's a couple things I like about the handle. First and foremost, the ergonomics are pretty great. They're actually pretty good. There's a couple minor gripes that I'll talk about later on in the video, but otherwise, this is a pretty comfortable knife. Now, would I say this is like a ZT-0452CF comfortable? No. I would say this still stands as probably my most comfortable knife I own, but would I say this is roughly on par in terms of comfort with, like, say, your PM2 and stuff like that? Absolutely. This guy is definitely super duper comfortable in the hand and fits really, really well. And I get a full purchase on this guy, so it's really, really nice. Not to mention these cutouts are very well placed, so they just bite into the hand and you're just in. Not to mention, I always love when knife manufacturers will put like a little swoop at the end here. There are certain knives that don't necessarily have that swoop, such as this Jimbo that I showed earlier. You guys can see there, it doesn't really have a swoop to it, maybe a little bit if you hold it just right, but this is a definite swoop. This is going to be very, very satisfying in the hand and make you feel like no matter what you do, you're not going to lose this knife. I'm pulling pretty hard and it's not coming off. Now, they also put a finger choil here, which I always appreciate, for people who want to do some up close and personal work with their knife. Obviously, you can just get a good finger choil going and just going for it. Now, what's funny is I just saw an interview with Andrew Demko where he had said that he doesn't like finger choils that much, but this is a pretty prominent finger choil. I mean, granted, would I say this is like a native chief kind of finger choil? No, just because it doesn't have a pop up here. So it's pretty much just drop down and then straight across to the blade. So you do have to be a little careful if you decide that you want to stab with this kind of a grip, but obviously this grip's not meant for stabbing. This grip is meant for fine work and stuff like that. Not a big deal. Obviously, it's not something I don't like. It's just, obviously, this is not a stabbing grip. This is a working grip, but I do appreciate the fact that they even put this on here anyways. Now, another thing I really, really like is, of course, the shark lock. It is incredible how well they did this lock. I was kind of skeptical because I saw this little ramp here and I was like, that's going to be so uncomfortable on the hand. Yeah, it's maybe not, it's not going to be like Italian leather or silk on your hand, but I mean, it's not as bad as you would think, especially in certain grips. Like I find myself pinch gripping this knife a lot because of how small it is. I want to pinch grip and cut like that. So I'm usually not even in the path of this guy, so it's not that big of a deal for someone like me. But it's so smooth as well, and that's a big, big thing. That's actually a big thing with this knife in general. The smoothness is incredible. The lock is smooth. The ball bearings are really, really dialed in well. there's no blade play at all. I have zero blade play on this knife. And again, the smoothness on it is incredible for having no blade play, no problems whatsoever. And this guy's been used. I've used this guy pretty heavily, you know. It's definitely a user knife that I have definitely taken advantage of. But it's just incredible how they managed to make such a strong, sturdy lock that's also smooth, that's also like really fidget friendly, and that's just an overall well done knife, or knife lock rather. But again, the smoothness in general on this knife is just superb. I really do appreciate it. Now, this is going to be kind of a side note, but the disassembly on this guy is really, really simple. You just take out these 3 screws right there. You take those out as well. And this guy pretty much just pulls apart pretty easy. Now, these are not snapped in exactly, but they're definitely frictioned and they're pretty tight. So it takes a little bit to pull these off. But for someone like me, who I was mainly looking to see how easy it would be to change out these scales, because, well, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it was actually a pretty simple, I guess, disassembly. So that's rather nice. Now, the final thing I'll talk about is just the fact that this knife was made at all. I do appreciate that Andrew Demko went out of his way to make the AD20.5 instead of just keeping the AD20 on shelves. And obviously, you know, the AD20 was so incredibly pricey. It was kind of scary. Even for the G10 version was super duper pricey, way more than most people were willing to spend, especially me. But Andrew Demko actually went out of his way to make a production version of a knife that was super duper popular and only found itself being more popular now because of this production model. I mean, I love this version of the knife. The AD20.5 is superb. It's not overly thick like the AD20. It's nice and simplistic. It's comfortable. It's not huge. It's just well done. And I just appreciate that he even decided to make this, because honestly, this is putting the AD20.5 or the AD20 model into the hands of people who originally couldn't afford it, like me. Now, going on to what I don't like about this knife. First and foremost, the handle is going to be the cause of a lot of gripes for me. First and foremost, the jimping is very, very aggressive. You guys can see there, the jimping is super duper aggressive. It's very rough on the hand. If you press down on it for too long, you're gonna get little dimples in your thumb, if you guys can see that. It doesn't feel great. Not to mention, I have carried this guy for the past couple weeks that I've had it. I literally could not take this thing out of my pocket. I loved having this thing in my pocket, but I eventually found myself not liking it in the pocket as much, and actually had to move it to the back pocket because I reached in to grab my wallet and I got my finger pretty bad. Ignore those other 2 scratches. Those are from my boxing practice, but I scratched my finger pretty bad just reaching in and grabbing my wallet. It didn't feel good. Obviously, a little bit of jimping on the sides of the handles would be nice, kind of like what they did on the bailout a little bit more. But this is just aggressive. This is just really trying to bite into some like gloves and stuff. And obviously with gloves, it makes a lot more sense, but I don't wear gloves on a day-to-day basis, as I can probably bet most of you don't either. And having my last knife been the Yojimbo with the smooth G10, going from smooth G10 to very rough and coarse Grivery, was not my favorite. So not a big fan of the rough Grivery jimping, but you know, beggars can't really be choosers. You could sand that down, whatever. But that does bring up another thing. I do not like these scales. I do not like, I do not mind Grivery. And also, like, I say I don't mind it because I got this knife for a pretty decent price. It wasn't overly expensive. It wasn't overly cheap. It was about $180, you know, for a production, for a pretty, I'm not going to say limited production, but I'll say this thing is obviously not going to be, you know, this thing's not going to be readily available. You know, these things sell out pretty fast. But for the price and stuff like that, the price was fine. Everything was fine like that. But obviously, I was hoping for maybe a little more higher quality scales. Honestly, when I bought this guy, I put it into my cart and bought it so fast that I didn't even read that it was Grivery. I thought it was G10 when I bought it, but it is Grivery, which is a shame. You know, Grivery handles just don't feel I guess, pleasing in the hand. It feels kind of cheapy. And obviously with such a premium steel on the blade, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I am glad they did it because obviously it helped the price kind of go down. But I'm not going to be keeping these red G10 scales, or G10, it's Grivery, there we go, scales. I actually found that Knife Center had some carbon fiber scales with some titanium, what are they called? Titanium spacers. So I am going to get those hopefully within the next couple months and just really make this guy look superb. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these handles. The comfort is good and everything like that. It's just they feel cheapy, and obviously they're plastic on a, like I said, premium blade steel. Just didn't really sit right with me. Now another thing that's kind of a hot spot, and I will admit it, it is a hot spot if you hold this knife in certain grips. The shark lock can be a bit of a hot spot on the thumb. Now I did say earlier that it's usually out of the way, especially for my grips and stuff like that. But obviously if you choke up like this, you're not gonna have a great time. You guys can see there, my thumb's just grazing that shark lock and it doesn't feel amazing. Now it is rounded on the top to make sure that you don't like cut yourself or anything on the shark lock, but it's still not the most comfortable thing in the world. But obviously, I would say that it's kind of every lock, everything like that has to have some kind of downside. There's no such thing as a perfect lock, and if there was, well, I'll have to try to find it because I have not found a single one that I would consider the perfect lock. And obviously this guy is an amazing lock nonetheless, but again, it's one downside. It's just going to be, it's not necessarily pleasing in a saber grip, but like I said, don't usually use the saber grip. I'll usually try to use this grip here. And then finally, the last thing that I'm not a huge fan of with this knife, but I'm also going to say this is not really a bad thing. It's just depending on how you see it. The fact that this is an exclusive to a online realtor, it's a little sad. You know, a lot of people maybe want to get this at like an in-person store or something like that. And unfortunately you can't. It is a Knife Center exclusive. Now, it's because it's a Knife Center exclusive that this version of the knife can exist. The 3V blade steel usually only comes on the titanium version of this knife, but Knife Center somehow talked Demko knives into allowing them to put the 3V on red Grivery handles to keep that price down while still giving you that premium steel, which I would argue is an amazing thing. But again, the thing that's not amazing is the fact that it's only available in one store, which means if it's sold out at that one store, you cannot get it anywhere else. And if you like getting your knives in person and stuff like that, you can't with this knife. And that's just a bit unfortunate. But again, not a huge deal. It's because of that reason that this guy can be made and all that, but it's still going to be something that I feel like I have to mention. Anyways, I will say this just kind of for a closing statement. This knife is incredible. I've carried this guy day in, day out for 2 to 3 weeks now, and I can tell you this now. This is 100% found its way in my top 5 favorite knives I've ever owned. And I'm so incredibly happy that I was able to get my hands on this because I never thought in a million years I'd get my hands on an AD knife. Obviously, like they had the AD15, the AD10, and now the AD20 and the AD20.5. I never thought I'd be able to get my hands on an Andrew Demko knife, and now that I do, I'm so happy I have it. You know, this is one of those knives that I don't think I could ever see myself selling. There we go. Now I will say this, might change out the handle scales, and if I do, I'll probably do a video on it. But anyways, guys, I absolutely recommend this knife for you guys, and if you can get your hands on the 3V version, do it. The 3V is so amazing. It's better than the D2, better than the AUS 10A. It's worth the price. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, whatever you guys want to do. I just appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me, even through my long-winded breaks. I do have a job now full-time, so my time is getting very thin, but I do have my Tuesdays and Wednesdays to be able to make videos or buy knives, whatever I end up doing that day. But thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and thank you.